Good evening and welcome back to Checkpoint. With me in studio tonight is Kimani Ichung'wah, he's Member of Parliament Kikuyu. We have Ayub Savula Lugari, Member of Parliament, and James Orengo, Siaya Senator. Kimani, let me start with you because last year there was that tax waiver given by Treasury on importation of sugar, and it led to a flooding of the market in essence, because what we've heard is that 1 million tons of sugar brought in last year, which is the total amount of sugar brought in the past 6 years. Doesn't this speak of a total breakdown in gatekeeping from government?
To be honest, I think it was a bit reckless. First, of course, we were experiencing the drought that was there last year and the escalating food prices that were there. Justifiably, there was need maybe to give that waiver. But the right way to do it was even to follow the East African Customs Act of 2012 that even stipulates that one, the CS National Treasury ought to have notified other CSs in the East African region and point out what quantity of sugar that we were deficient of, how much we needed to import, correct, from where we were importing, whether it was industrial or commercial, the sugar for consumption, and in what quantities, and for what period of time. But you give business people a blanket check and a blank check to fill in figures for them, to sign whatever amount they want, they will definitely
Who should take responsibility?
Therefore, government, of course, government has to take responsibility. And that is why I've said, in line with all these things revolve around the issues we are talking about, corruption in the country. And if we are really honest and genuine in this fight against corruption, then Parliament must, and I want to believe, unlike those who are pessimistic about the role that Parliament will play, I want to believe that Parliament, the two parliamentary committees, will rise to the occasion and heed President Uhuru Kenyatta's words. That one, it will be business as unusual. Two, that there shall be no sacred cows.
Yeah.
Whoever it is, whatever position you hold in government or out of government, people must be held to account. Yeah. Because as I said, it's not just about the sugar and this question of whether there's mercury and copper and lead in the sugar. It goes beyond that to the life and sustenance of life. For millions of farmers and their dependents in Luo Nyanza, in Western Kenya, those people who are in the sugarcane growing areas and parts of the coast region, I think in Kuala, the areas where they're growing sugarcane, it also touches on our own stability as a country. Okay.
I also think Parliament is helpless. All they can do is look into this, make recommendation.
Which mostly are never acted on.
That is the end. That is the end. Yeah. They don't have an implementing mechanism.
Capacity, yeah.
That rests with the government. When it comes to things like tax waivers, which are very important, you know, the current constitution has provision dealing with tax waivers because of the malpractice of yesteryears. So there were specific provisions which were put in place to ensure that tax waivers are not granted anyhowly. And when it happens in the magnitude that we are experiencing with the sugar matter, the Cabinet Secretary in Treasury should be answering some questions. You know, every time in Kenya anything happens, we tend to go for the middle-ranking, public servant. In another jurisdiction, something of this magnitude, a cabinet secretary or somebody above the level of cabinet secretary should be taking responsibility or answering questions. But you see now we have taken Ongwae, and I think Ongwae, poor man, he had issued some statements, which to some extent now you could see even Matiang'i withdrawing from his original position, where he had made a categorical statement. And therefore, at the end of the day, it is Matiang'i, Aden, and the president. These are the people who should really bear responsibility. They should come out openly and confess to the country that this thing happened through our hands, because a tax exemption cannot be given by Mr. Ongwae. It cannot even be given by the Commissioner General of KRA. Okay. It has to have a ministerial authority. Right. And when it was of such a magnitude, I don't think any minister will act without reference to the president or the deputy president.
Okay.
Let me just
Let's listen as we come to what you're about to say. Ongwae, the boss of the Kenya Bureau of Standards, when he appeared before a committee of parliament on the questions around sugar.
Samples from other locations have been completed. The sugar samples were tested against EAS 749-2010. The sugar samples were further tested for heavy metal contaminants. As a result of public outcry, and no mercury was detected. I want to be very specific that no mercury has been detected in the samples that we have.
So no mercury was found. That is the man in charge of the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Savula, I come to you. So what can we tell Kenyans now? Because there's been all of these positions. What do we know of the sugar in the Kenyan market today?
What we know in the sugar in the sugar in the Kenyan market now, we're not sure of the safety of Kenyan when they are consuming such sugar. But what I just wanted to touch on the issue.
So Kenyans should what now?
No, the Ministry of Health should withdraw all the sugar from the market. Test it afresh before you supply it back to the market. You cannot subject Kenya to this hazard.
Are these not cartels fighting? Is it about contaminated sugar or contraband sugar, or is it cartels because of the surplus in the market and everyone is looking for market, then they muddy the other?
Ishungu has just talked about blanket importation. The sugar that was imported was raw sugar. The raw sugar means it has to go back for further processing in the other sugar factories. After processing, I know what is going on. They mix with the local sugar, then they release it to the market. But it has to go through further tests by KEBS. You have to send KEBS to West Kenya. You have to send KEBS to Sukari mills. You have to send all over so that to test the quality of that sugar before you release it in the market. But what Ishungu had said, Kenya, we are taking a reverse step towards helping a common farmer in this country. The commissary briefs end February next year. The conditionalities that we are given by COMESA is that we privatize these sugar companies, we allow private capital to be injected in so that we modernize them so that they can produce enough sugar and we avoid the issue of sugar imports. The other worst mistake the CS Treasury did is a chairman of the budget committee here, and they will concur with me on that, is to remove the sugar development levy. Sugar development levy is not a farmer levy. You're not helping farmer by removing the SDL. You're worsening the situation. Okay. The sugar development levy is a consumer levy. The one who consumes sugar is the one who pays the sugar levy. And the sugar levy, in turn, goes back to help the farmer to produce the cane by doing roads in the sugar belt, by actually giving loans to the sugar factories to revamp their production, but also giving loans to the farmers to start producing cane in areas where they are unable to produce.
So Kimani, do you also say, like Savula, that we don't know the status of the sugar Kenyans are partaking now?
I want to say I'm Kenyan. I do not know. I just have faith that the sugar I'm taking is probably not contaminated.
Do you have confidence in the gatekeepers with contradicting statements?
Let me say this, for any responsible government officer, anywhere in the world, if you found out that you had sugar that was contaminated in even one supermarket, what you should do is go back all the way to the wholesaler, the distributor, to the importer. Get to know it is Sophia Wanuna who imported this sugar, Sophia, which other wholesalers and retailers have gotten access to this contaminated sugar, then withdraw it from the market. If that is not being done, then it puts doubt in my head on whether really there was contaminated sugar in the first place to begin with. And I'm just saying that because I would expect for any responsible government officer, you go out and make a public pronouncement that there is mercury, copper, and all sort of harmful things, that would be detrimental to the public health. I would have expected that public health officers would have been detailed to identify where has this sugar gone to, get it off the market.
So Matiang'i was irresponsible in making such a assertion?
If indeed there was contamination, and there is that verifiable fact that there was contaminated sugar in the market, and you have done nothing to make sure that that contaminated sugar is withdrawn from the market, I must say without flinching an eye that it is extremely irresponsible, and he should also take responsibility for that. The other thing we need to ask ourselves, There is what came into the country as imports through duty-free, through the normal channels. How much more is coming through the porous borders that we have?
Back channels, yeah.
That we do not know. Have we been able to establish whether this contaminated sugar, if it is there in the first place, because we do not know as yet whether it's there or not, if we are to believe them, how did it get into the country? Is it through the porous borders, or is it through the normal channels, through the port of Mombasa or elsewhere?
Okay.
Those are things then that need to be investigated, and we get to the bottom of it.
All right.
And we must have people taking responsibility. That is the only way we can support President Uhuru Kenyatta in his very firm assertion that it will be business as unusual, and people will take responsibility individually.
All right. Senator, let me bring this to you. We've seen the KEBS boss Ongwae. He was arrested, questioned and charged with attempted murder. He came alongside other officials from KEBS, alongside other charges as well. And it was not on the sugar. It was about substandard fertilizer that was imported and the procurement of the KEBS sticker, which is the quality mark of standard, finding that it was easy for others to copy the same. What do you make of this charges?
Whenever there's a war between public servants, they will look for something else. Because I think some people in government were very annoyed that he made the statement that the sugar had no mercury. That was a categorical statement which went contrary to what Mr. Matiang'i said. And I think somebody did not want that to hold without bearing some kind of responsibility. But I come now to Mr. Matiang'i, because at the end of the day, they have said that this sugar was contaminated. I mean, he has kind of mitigated the earlier statement. But having said that it is contaminated, they should now be advising the public what the public should do. Should we partake of this sugar? And if you are partaking in part, which kind of sugar should we be buying from Mumias or from Rai? At the end of the day, I think the responsibility is with the cabinet secretaries.
There needs to be guidance to the public.
There needs to be guidance. Yeah. And you've seen in the West, whenever something affects, even cars,
defect in a Mercedes-Benz.
If there's a defect in a Mercedes-Benz,
they recall
or whatever car,
they recall all of them.
whether they are
so the netting of sugar we are seeing in various parts of the country, that is not sufficient. There needs to be general guidance on how to treat this.
Sophia, for me, that was just a public circus. Why are you going for small retailers in Othaya and in Kitui with 60 bags, 200 bags, whereas you can go back to know if there was indeed contaminated sugar, who imported this sugar?
They really imported.
And they will be able to tell you, we have sold all our contaminated sugar, or even if it was not contaminated and you narrow it down to Kimani Ichung'wah is the one who was the importer of this sugar, I can tell you who and who did I sell it to.
Because when this statement now comes out to say that the sugar, confiscated sugar found to have been contaminated as a result of poor handling and storage.
Who was the main importer? You target the main importer first.
Okay.
Who is the big fish? That's why we need a public inquest. There are big fish behind this thing. It's not those small fish you are talking about in Kirinyaga, retailers in Othaya, retailers in Kitui.
I think the starting point is the cabinet secretaries.
Cabinet secretary.
What made them make these statements? They should be held to account.
Responsible.
And then the second in the category would be the main importers. Not, as Ichung'wah is saying, a supplier in Kirinyaga.
What if that supplier in Kirinyaga also has contaminated sugar?
Yes.
But he received the sugar from who?
Across the board.
He received the sugar from who? Who supplied the sugar?
Where did this retailer in Kirinyaga get that sugar from? Because there could be others who you have not gotten to. And that's why it's important to go to the source of the sugar, so that you get to know who else has this contaminated
we need a
sugar.
public inquest.
Back
You sound like Mudavadi. He called for that earlier today, and we'll play his clip. Yes.
What did he say?
Just come back to what Senator Orengo is saying on public officers contradicting each other and seemingly fixing each other. That Ongwae has to be fixed because he said something that somebody did not like. And I would really have begged to hear Senator Orengo's, being a senior counsel, his views on the charge of attempted murder, because in my very basic understanding of law, when you charge somebody with attempted murder, you must at least be able to prove that he had motive. And therefore, you find that it's a charge that is just being dropped.
Defective charge.
Just to fix him. And really, is it Do we charge with attempted murder? Do we charge with abuse of office and negligence of duty?
There's also abuse of office in those charges. Can it stick briefly as a country?
If we leave this thing to the investigative arm of EACC and the DCI, we'll actually charge the small fish, the omenas.
So who should we leave it to?
Let's go for public inquest.
When did
so
in
that
this
we can
country
deal with
a
this matter
public
like the way we dealt with
inquest?
the golden bag? That is the way to go.
No, Sabola, even a public inquest, we've had so many public inquests.
But now we'll charge the small fish.
Even Ouko, there was a public inquiry, a whole commission of inquiry. It was stopped in its tracks. And so many other inquiries that have taken place, even relating to implementation of certain laws, certain public officers, there have been inquests.
So what's the way forward?
We have a legal framework, and somebody up there, and that is why I'm saying the buck should stop with people who are sitting in cabinet, which includes the president, that they should take that responsibility to where it lies. And that is not by going for the big fish, like the DPP was saying. Because they say people have talked about the big fish for a long time. They are whales. And this is what we need to do.
Okay.
Go for the
final
whales.
statement from you, sir?
A final statement is that at the end of the day, we need to protect the farmer. We want West Kenya.
Isn't the Western Sugar Belt dead now, in essence?
Mumias Sugar,
There's sugar for 6 years.
Sugar Company is in the mortuary. It's not operating.
Yes.
Zoya Sugar Company is in ICU. Chemily Sugar Company is in high dependence unit. Sony Sugar is in HDU. The solution to this thing is that we need to give incentive to the farmers to plant cane, and we bar millers from importing sugar. Let them deal with the business of handling the farmer. Harvest the farmer cane in Malava, take it to West Kenya Sugar Factory, crush the sugar, sell the sugar in the market, and pay the farmer. Leave the business of importing sugar to registered importers. The government should have a system of knowing how much is the deficit and float through a public tender. Apply and allocate them according to their capacity and according to the country's deficit.
Kimani, we'll end up with this. What do you make of the assertion that the government is not serious about reviving the sugar cane farming and industry in and of itself, and that it's allowing cartels, as they have been referred to thrive?
I think that's why Sophia have said we must look at this inquiry into this sugar importation saga holistically.
Good.
If we look at it just as a point of few bags of imported contaminated sugar, I think we'll be losing it. President Uhuru Kenyatta has prioritized food security and manufacturing as his one of the 4 big agendas that he intends to deal with in this legacy term of his. I think it's incumbent on governments now to really prioritize the revival and sustenance of these sugar factories in Western Kenya and Nyanza region.
Correct.
If indeed we are to change the lives of the people of Nyanza and Western Kenya, we must make sure that those sugar factories and the sugar industry is indeed revived. If it is to privatize them, this is the time to do it. Let us seize this moment to fix this problem once and for all. There cannot be manufacturing if we are not manufacturing our own sugar. We are still importing sugar from Brazil and even from also from Mozambique. Yes, from Sudan.
And on that
people
note,
we should even be donating sugar to, not even importing from them.
On that note, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Kimani Ichung'wah, Member of Parliament, Kikuyu, are very happy. Ayub Savula, Member of Parliament, Lugari, and James Orengo, who's the Senator, Siaya County. Thank you for being with us tonight here on Checkpoint. And thank you for watching. We're not yet done. When we return, my colleague, Robinson Okenya, is coming up with all the sporting action. Stay with us for that.